see if we can do this way. Is it going to focus? Yes. Okay. Awesome. Looks like this will work. Okay. So what you're going to do, I've got these in different varying stages of being done so that I could show you how it goes, because I don't want to have to go back and forth to the sewing machine. You guys don't need to watch me sew on a sewing machine and hear all that noise. So to start with, you're going to take your applique pieces and you're going to trace them onto, so your applique pieces will be on your sheets of paper after you print them out. And you're going to trace them onto interfacing. And you want to use the lightest interfacing that you can find. This is actually medium weight, which is not the best, but it's what I had, and so it's what I'm using. If you don't already have some interfacing, buy some featherweight interfacing, because that'll be the best for this. Midweight works just fine too. Just depends on what you have or what you like. So you see the glue dots are on this side, but you're going to trace onto the other side, which is what would seem normal to you anyway. That's the way it comes off the roll. So you're going to trace the seam allowance part onto your interfacing. Of course, if you're just going to do raw edge, you just trace around the regular piece of applique. You don't trace around the seam allowance, because you'll cut that part off if you're going to do raw edge, but we're not doing raw edge. So this is actually the piece with the seam allowance on it. Let me see if I can find this piece so I can show you what I mean. Yeah, here it is. So that's the whole piece. So you trace around the whole piece onto the back side of your interfacing. The glue side is the other side. And you'll put it onto your fabric. Now this seems very counterintuitive because you're used to putting it on the back side of your fabric, but you're going to put it on the right side of your fabric with the glue side down to the right side of your fabric. You are not going to iron this. If you iron it, you will ruin your fabric. So you're going to put it onto your right side of your fabric. And I do more pins, but I'm just showing you. So I pin all the way around as much as I need to keep it nice and flat. And then I just cut it out. These are all the pieces that I've cut out already. And then you'll take it to your sewing machine. And you can see this is the back side of the fabric. This is the front side of the fabric with the interfacing on it. And then if you can see this, let me see if I can get it close enough where you can see the stitching. But I went ahead and stitched it at 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So it's stitched down, but you don't iron it. Don't ever iron it. I'm going to repeat that like 5 times. Don't ever iron it. And then when you're done stitching all the way around, you're going to pull those 2 pieces apart so that you don't cut your fabric. And you're just going to make a little slit close to the edge of the inside so that you can get your scissors in there. And then you're going to just cut all the way around. Leave about 1/4 or a little more than 1/4 of an inch of your interfacing all the way around the inside of your applique piece. Can you see that yet? Okay. It's hard to tell because it's hard to see the screen on my phone when I have it on the holder. So anyway, you're just going to cut all the way around the inside. And what you can do, especially on these large pieces, is save the piece of interfacing from the inside and use it for some of the smaller pieces that you have to cut out. So you go all the way around and you'll end up with a piece like this. And then you'll cut clips in, because these are curved pieces, so you want to cut clips in so that you can make it nice and flat when it comes out. It won't be all wrinkly on the edges from not being clipped. So clip the corners just like you normally would on anything. Also, if you have any pointy spaces, like this has a little pointy place right here, you'll want to cut that corner off. And actually, I'm going to trim down this seam allowance just the tiniest bit so that I can get it nice and pointy there on that edge. And then you're just going to flip this inside out so that your right side of your fabric is showing. And because we're not going to use an iron on these, I use a, you can either use the back side of your fingernail if you have fingernails like I do, or use the backside of your chopstick. I use a chopstick to turn everything out. So here's my chopstick. So I'm turning out that point, and I'm going all the way around the inside, because can you see how, so I've turned the point out, and can you see how it's like a little bit like flat or pointy in some spots? If you take your chopstick and you go all the way around the inside, it kind of will press it for you so it gets nice and curved, and you won't have so many points. That's the spot where I ended on my sewing right there. So I just go all the way around the inside with the chopstick, and then when I'm done, I lay it flat, and I use the back side of the chopstick to burnish it down just to make it flatter without having to iron it. Just like that. Can you see this? Gosh, I wish I could see better on this phone. Okay, so just make sure I'm getting this into the picture here. Okay. So you can just use the back side of your chopstick to make it nice and flat. And then you'll lay it out on your, once the piece is already done like this, so now your glue side is facing out. And once your pieces are all done like this, you'll put it onto your backing fabric, and then you can press it, and that will hold it down onto your background so that you can sew with your sewing machine just around the edges, just a very, very slight seam all the way around the edges. Then it'll be machine sewn down. It'll be nice and secure, and you won't have to worry about washing your quilt, and you can even use this on baby quilts, and it'll be all secure and well sewn. So this works great on big pieces, but if you look at, here's the applique piece. This is the block. It has stems for the flowers. Now the stems for the flowers are really thin, and because they're so thin, doing this applique technique doesn't work so great. Trying to turn these inside these tiny little spaces makes it like very difficult. So the way that I do stems is this. I make a piece of bias. This is just a fat quarter of fabric. And what I do is I just lay it out. I'm going to show you the proper way here. This is your selvage edge. We know that edge is straight, right? Because it's the selvage. And I take my ruler, and all of these rulers have markings on them. This one has the 30-degree marking going this way. It has a 45 here. It has a 60 here. So if you have to cut 60-degree angles, 45-degree angles, you can do that all with this one ruler. So what I do to cut a bias piece, that's a 45-degree angle cut. So I take my 45-degree angle here, and I line it up along the edge of my selvage. Making sure that you guys can see this because I can't tell. There. You should be able to see that. Okay. So this is the 45-degree angle right here. And I'm lining it up along the edge of my selvage. This will be a 45-degree cut. That means that anything I cut on either side of that will be a nice 45 degrees, which will make it a nice stretchy piece of bias. So I'm going to actually make this smaller, or I'm just going to take a piece that I already had and show you. Hold on. Got it right here somewhere. I had them all laid out nice so that I could show you. Well, poop. Okay, I will just cut this. So I'm keeping it lined up, and I'm just going to cut a small piece because I don't want to cut up my whole piece of fat quarter because I already cut one corner off. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this at 45 degrees. Okay, and then I'm going to take this and turn it this way so that I can cut cut a 1 1/4 inch piece. So what we're going to do for our stems is we're going to cut a 1 1/4 inch. And all you need to do is make sure that these stem pieces, that this piece that you're cutting is as long as this piece of stem, which it is. So I'm going to cut this at 1 1/4. So this is going to be our stem. I've already cut this piece and pressed it. So what you'll do is you'll press it in half, long ways like this. And once you have it pressed, well, even before it's pressed, you'll see it's very stretchy. You can stretch it really easy. And so this is pressed. And then what you'll do is draw where you want the stem to go. So think of this as your background piece. And I just drew a curve so that you could see what I mean about this. So what you do is you take your piece of bias, you take the raw edges, you put them up against the line that you've drawn where you want your stem to go, the raw edges, and you sew it down 1/4 inch in. And you just sew it all around that curve. Because it will curve, because it will stretch, you can keep it laying flat and sew it right around that curve with no problem. It's very, very easy. So here's the piece that I already did. I sewed it around the curve. And after you've done this, what you do is take it and press it over. And that makes your nice thin piece of stem. Just like that. So it's pressed. And once you press it, then you just go back and edge stitch right along the edge of that. And you have a nice curved stem. And it's super simple. It's much easier than trying to turn those stem pieces. Because if you try to turn the stem pieces, you just have to trust me, it's hard. It's easy to do if you want to, well, not easy, but it's easier if you want to do it by hand, but I don't have time for hand sewing, I'm sorry. I mean, maybe sometimes. Sometimes I like to hand sew, but if I just want to make a quilt and I want to do some fun applique that's pretty, but I just want it to be nice and simple, this is the easiest way to do it. So you just make a bias piece, you put the raw edge of that piece that you've folded and ironed, folded and pressed in half, put the raw edge of that up against your curve, make it curve because it stretches just like that, and sew it down at 1/4 inch. Then you just flip it over and edge stitch it. Makes it really, really easy.